the Melbourne market finished its last end of the cycle, and it didn't really do anything from then till about 2020. It was pretty much flat in those 2 years. So you can probably add 2 years to this graph. But since COVID, really, you can see Melbourne's performance here. It's done literally this. Now, this is CoreLogic data, mind you, so I'm not making this up. But you can see as of early 2025 there, Melbourne has literally done only around 10% growth. We need a lot of the other capitals doing around 30 and some others also doing 70 to 80% capital growth. Now, this number, mind you, already now is probably about 2 to 4% above where that graph line is. And it's simply because we're a few more months into the year, and pretty much every city has had a slight bit of growth since then. So just to give an idea, that's how much Melbourne has actually underperformed in recency. And this graph, as I said, you really need to take it out to about 7 years because Melbourne didn't really do anything between 2018 and 2020. So that's where Melbourne's kind of at. And furthermore to that, this is why it's a market anomaly. If you look at the long-term price trends, so these two graphs to give you an idea, or should I say data points, one's the Aussie Home Loans 25-year report, the other's a CoreLogic 30-year report to give you an idea. So I'm not making this data up. You'll see on the left here, by far the highest capital growth city is Melbourne. By far, you can see 8.1% capital growth average, Sydney second place behind that. And now, don't get me wrong, sure, like Melbourne did have a good run to that period, but we are talking over 25 years. We're not talking as though this is just taking in, the boom of 2013 to 2017 in Melbourne. We're talking about literally, 21 more years on top of that. And on the right there, you can see, so this graph actually came out in 2022. So this is actually after, as I said, Melbourne didn't really do anything in the years between 2018 really and 2020. It did have a small dead cat balance, obviously because of COVID, but only about 10%, so not much, right up to 2022. So this is actually encapsulating some of that period where Melbourne didn't do anything. And you can see the consistency just there of Melbourne alone. That was our best capital growth city. If anyone wants to search that up, just search up CoreLogic 30-year report. You can find it on Google or any other search engine quite easily. And it was our best performing capital city. So historically speaking, Melbourne's actually the best performing capital city, although it has been the worst performer in recency. So you can already see what I'm getting at. And it's actually been the worst performer for quite a long time as well. Now, to demonstrate what I'm talking about as well, I'm actually going to compare this to different cities. And the importance of this is actually showing you the general ratios of what Melbourne is generally priced to other cities, because it's really important to understand that as well and where things are at in cycles. So first things first, I'm actually going to compare Melbourne to Adelaide, Perth and Brisbane. And yes, in this graph you will show Sydney, but I have a much better one in Sydney to show you later. So you'll see here generally Melbourne does outprice between it shows here between 20 probably and 30% on average. It would probably outprice Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth depending on the city you're in. Although, if you actually go back further, so this graph doesn't show it, and I couldn't actually get PropTrack to show me it, unfortunately, but I actually did a bit more analysis, and Melbourne generally will price all of these areas actually on average somewhere between 20 and 50%. If you take only houses into that, I mean, because this is saying home prices, I mean literally detached houses only into that, Melbourne will actually outprice these areas even more. It'll generally be somewhere between 40 and 80% on average. And this is data since the 1990s, so technically since 1992, so 33 years worth of data. But you can see there, basically every single city is abnormally priced compared to Melbourne. Most of these cities are actually more expensive than Melbourne at the moment. Now, I will put a caveat to that. These are just saying home price dwellings. They're not including detached dwellings, which is the only thing I actually buy. Melbourne does slightly outprice all of these cities on that alone, but still it is abnormally priced compared to the actual historical ratio of all of these cities. So let's just get into the final one now. Melbourne doesn't generally correlate with Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. However, it does have fairly strong correlation to Sydney. So if you look at the pricing ratio just to Sydney alone here, you'll see here that the average houses pricing ratio is very, very cheap compared to Sydney. Now, what I'm showing you here is the decade average is actually only just around the late 20s, so it's about 28 to 29%. However, it is right now above 40% in Sydney, and that's an area it actually correlates to. So what I'm showing here is Melbourne is literally cheap to every single city that we have in Australia, every single one of them, even the one it correlates to in Sydney. So it is showing you that it's actually one of the best places to buy simply because of the ratio and where everything's at. So that's the reason it's literally the best place to purchase in the entire country, one of them. And it's a complete anomaly because usually Sydney and Melbourne market do correlate very closely, but you can see just there recently, they're not correlating exactly how they do, but this will catch back up. Now, as I said, like Melbourne actually, this graph isn't as accurate to Melbourne as you probably want it to be, because I would argue it's actually about a 25% to 24%, maybe 24 to 25% long-term average. This only shows you since about 2015. If you go in the years before that, it actually even shows stronger. So if you especially go in the years between 2003 and 2008, it's actually under the 25% mark, and it's well under. It's more closer to the 20% mark in some years there. So that's another reason why Melbourne is very, very well priced. Ratio-wise, it is excellent, and I can't think of a better ratio to any other city in Australia than Melbourne.